The previous basket is under review.
Welcome back to Stats by Will and Jim, the college basketball podcast that focuses on the numbers. We have a surprise for you folks. I am your host, Jim Root, per usual, but we have a guest host stepping in. Will Warren is out and about. So we are bringing back the original host of Tits, the Isaac Trotter Show. Isaac Trotter is here of CBS Sports. Isaac, how are you doing? Thank you for stepping in today.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's totally fun to be a long reliever, step in for a couple innings and in relief. Will's been carrying a heavy role, and it's fun to be back with you. You know how highly I think of you, and I'm excited about this episode. We're gonna do some fun things today.
Yeah, we're going to hit the normal 7-stat rotation for those familiar with the show. Isaac's going to step in there and pinch hit. You mentioned Will's been carrying a heavy burden. That's because he's with me. And that means you have to carry a heavy burden also. So we're counting on you. We're all counting on you. But we trust you. We think Isaac's got what it takes. That's why he's here. That's why we're ready to talk to him. We are, of course, a part of the Basket Under Review, the very best college basketball community going. Only $10 a month gets you access to the website, all kinds of writing. Will is still writing, folks. Don't worry. So you can check that out there if you're missing him on this episode. You've also got Brian Ralph's Ralph Report. You got the Burt podcast with Eamon Brennan and Tate Frazier, Scout Team, all kinds of updates around the conferences. Joy Dwyer's doing his guest hits all the time. Anything you can think of, we've got it there at Basket Under Review. You can also join the Discord. Constant discussion about coaching carousel, transfer portal, the games of the day. There's in-game discussion. Anything you want as a college basketball fan, you can find it in there. Highly recommend joining. But before we get into our 7-stat rotation, we got to start with the stat of the day. I told Isaac this one's kind of out there, kind of tough. We're just going to bandy it back and forth and educate the listeners, hopefully, about some teams that are playing well and some teams that are playing poorly. I went to haslametrics.com. We are a stat site, or a stat pod after all, to find the most and least momentum in the Power 5 right now. This is based on performance over the last 4 to 8 games relative to full season. So without further ado, Isaac, if you want to start with the teams with the most momentum or the least momentum in Power 5 basketball, feel free to take it in whatever direction you want.
Okay, this is wild. It could go a lot of different ways. Least momentum, factoring in preseason stuff. I'll go with Purdue. A team started really hot, has had a little bit of fallen on hard times, barely beats Oregon. Where am I at here?
I thought Purdue would be up there because, again, not a gambling show, but they are 1-8 against the spread in their last 9 games. So underperforming expectations pretty consistently. I think they are helped quite a bit by blowing out Maryland by 30 in the one game that they did overperform expectations. So they're not there. Let me see if I can, the top of the positive momentum. There are 2 teams that I'm not even going to make you guess. Marquette is 3rd and Rutgers is 5th, which is just an indication of how bad they were, more so than how well they're playing right now. But there are 3 teams in the top 5 that I think you can get. One is in the Big 12, one is in the SEC, and one is in the ACC. The ACC team just had a pretty exciting weekend. That's my hint for you.
Okay, so Big 12 momentum, Kansas. Just red hot right now, feeling the vibe.
It should be, right? It's not, which is shocking to me. So it's a tough stat. It's a tough stat. And I'm trying to think if Kansas has like a bad performance mixed in there. I guess they didn't play that well against Utah, but so we got Houston's up there as the top Power 5 team in momentum. I guess you got the road win at BYU. They smashed UCF. That looks really good. And no like down performances. There's one SEC team at the top and one SEC team at the bottom, and they just like a week and a half ago played the biggest blowout in the history of the conference. If that's a hint for you.
Okay, I'm squirrel brain. I'm still thinking ACC though, because you said that was a hint.
Okay.
Carolina,
Yep.
obviously.
Yep, Carolina is 4.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I the one Carolina thought I had was like maybe that West Coast trip was actually a blessing in disguise. Like, could you lose the battle but win the war? Because they might have figured some things out there in the long term, even if it hurt in the moment. SEC widest thing. That's a good question.
They beat a team by 47 in a road conference game.
Oh, so South Carolina and Florida, right?
Yep, Florida's number 2. I'm sure that performance is impacting both of these measurements quite a bit. So Florida's up there second, and South Carolina has the worst momentum in Power 5 basketball right now. The Big 12 team with poor momentum, they're third. This is one you could probably guess based on what you were sort of going with Kansas, a team with high expectations preseason that is struggling to just get in the win column right now.
BYU.
Yep. Lost 6 of 7 now, right? No, 5 of 6. And just, not able to get the depth of contributions outside of their top 3. So they're struggling. Creighton is also way up there. They haven't been playing very well. I think the massive blowout loss to Marquette is heavily influencing both of those teams landing in this ranking. Penn State, who has gotten smashed a few times. And this one surprised me a little bit. Virginia, a team that, had been playing really well after the turn of the new year. I think over the last 2 to 3 weeks hasn't quite been up to snuff. I don't know if they're playing with their food a little bit because they haven't had as many big tests. But Virginia, keep an eye on them. I mean, maybe they've got big ones coming up, so they've got something to prove still.
No, that's a good pull on Virginia. The thing I noticed about Virginia, I love their style of basketball. I still think they may have the highest potential of road that they could go of all the ACC teams. Like I could see them advancing the furthest in March. But there's a few more defenders in that rotation that you can pick on the perimeter. And I think that's something that I didn't necessarily notice early that I've started to notice a little bit more throughout the beef of non-conference or of conference play. So if Virginia goes out, I think it could be because they just don't have like, do they have an elite perimeter defender at a high level? Like Chance Mallory gets skinny over screens and is a pretty good defender in his regard. Sam Lewis is big. Jakari White can come in and help you. He was one of the better defenders in the Summit last year, but what does that mean when the Summit
damning with faint praise right there? Yeah.
Right. Like Malik Thomas is a great offensive player who's not really known yet for his defense. So I think they have a lot of Dallin Hall is a good defender because he's old, but I wouldn't say he's I'm not thinking of him of the list of top 10 best, point of attack defenders or whatever. So I think that might explain a little bit of the Virginia slide as of late.
Yeah. They're heavily reliant on their backline shot swatting, rim protection, because the guards you can't always keep guys in front. And I just want to give a special shout out non-P5 to Dayton, who is by far the lowest momentum in the country. I think every Dayton Flyer fan is nodding in agreement right now, just with the trajectory of where the Flyers are going. It's ugly there. Could be an adventurous March/off season in Dayton. All right, one last thing before we get into our 7-stat rotation where we go back and forth. A shout out to Homefield. Homefield Apparel, the best place to get your college sports gear for the current college basketball season. Homefield just came out with a special basketball line. So if you really are looking for specifically hoops gear, you want to get in now. It's February. They're going to be busy. So if you want it shipped and ready for you on your backs before March, make sure you get to homefieldapparel.com ASAP. T-shirts, hoodies, sweaters, jackets, joggers, whatever it is you're looking for, they've got it with all kinds of unique logos. So head to homefieldapparel.com. Use promo code BURNER15 for 15% off your first purchase. That is BURNER15 for a discount at homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. All right, Isaac, you are the guest. I'm the host. That means you get to lead off. So wow the folks with your top number, and we'll go back and forth with each of our 7 numbers.
Okay, my number is plus 117, and that is St. John's rebound and turnover margin combined in Big East play. And I think that it's really interesting to look at what the other teams in the league are at. So St. John's at 117. Remember that number. Second place is UConn at 79. So that's a huge, enormous gap. And, I think this stat does a really good job of just helping understand the turnover push pull or the possession push pull, because sometimes I think when you just look at field goal attempts as understanding St. John's had more field goal attempts or whatever, that's hard for me to understand because how much do I factor in free throws? A trip to the foul line is a scoring opportunity for me. So I think this stat, which you can find on CBB Analytics, I would highly suggest subscribing. Understanding of your rebound and turnover margin differential does kind of understand, help you illustrate why St. John's is so good at what they do right now. Now, I'm not blown away by them overall. I thought the win over UConn was awesome, but they've had some, shakier-ish moments, but their floor seems ridiculously high to me in this league. When you're able to out-rebound teams on a consistent basis and when your turnover margin is this wide, and they do what they do better than almost anybody else in the league.
Yeah, I'd say they played poorly against Xavier and they still win because of some of these possession advantages. And I'm glad you had St. John's. That's one of my numbers is St. John's related as well, and it's plus 17.4. That is their net rating when they play Zuby, Mitchell, and Hopkins together, like the big three that early on in the season they were kind of playing around with lineups and they weren't starting that group, and it was debatable whether they could actually play together because of spacing. And yeah, the spacing's not great with them, but they're in the 99th percentile in offensive rebound rate with that group together, 98th percentile in turnover rate. Like they're not coughing the ball up at all. And on the defensive end, they're in the 89th percentile in forcing turnovers. So kind of encapsulating your point, when that group plays together, they dominate the offensive glass and they're killing it in turnover margin. And they can have some off night shooting and survive. Then when you throw in Dylan Darling playing well, like he is right now, or some made shots from Isaiah Sellers, then they look really good and can beat UConn on a big national stage. But at this point, with only one loss in the Big East, those two combined have one loss against each other. It's kind of separated themselves in that conference.
Yeah, I think the St. John's lesson here too is that like there is no such thing as a perfect roster build, I don't think, in college basketball these days. And so like when you get those type of the three big forwards, I was saying it in November, October. I don't know if you were too. Like I thought those three were three of their best four players and needed to be on the floor at all times. Like I was like, screw the spacing. Like let's just load up and do what we do at a high level. And I think that's what they're kind of getting back to is like you can make up the margins at other spots if we're just ridiculously good at these few areas. And that's something that I think St. John's is kind of honed in on. Now, again, this is not a predictive stat, I don't think necessarily moving forward, because I think it's going to come down to personnel and who the draw is that they play. Like there's going to be times where they play certain teams in March that like can match up with them. The personnel is literally everything, I think, for St. John's, maybe even more than other teams just because of the style of play that's developed here. So if they go up against a Florida, like obviously their rebound margin is not going to be the same type of deal. And that's something I definitely want to keep in mind as Selection Sunday kind of rolls in less than 5 weeks.
Yeah, and I think for them it's huge to try to keep climbing the seed curve, because if you can get into like that 4-5 area where you can get to the Sweet 16 without having to play a top 3 seed, that looks a lot better for them. If you can dodge those top teams, because they were sitting kind of 7-6 for a while, but the UConn win and just the fact that they keep winning, they're climbing.
The last thing too, not to belabor the St. John's point, the guard play in the Big East isn't very good overall compared to like some of the others. And so I think like a group like this that can be so overwhelming and so nasty defensively with their takeaway machines against undermanned guard play, like I think that's where it's, their strengths are even more like showcasing. And when you get into March and you get to play some of these elite point guards, I could see St. John's pressure not being quite as impactful.
I'm curious, just to kind of a tangent off that, like how some of these like conference wide things happen where like Nebraska gives up a ton of threes and the Big Ten doesn't shoot it that well. Does that bite them if they play outside the conference in March? Like to your point with handling the ball against St. John's, so they can play a better backcourt, somebody can take care of it. I'm very curious about that as well. But that's something we'll litigate come March. Another thing that I am curious to see in March, and the number I had lined up first is 250-18. That is the record of the KenPom Top 13 against everybody else. They have 19 losses against each other, or 19-19. The top 13s play 19 games against each other, and then 250-18 losses against everyone else. And I think that really does demonstrate the separation at the top of the sport, maybe indicative of the kind of tournament we're going to have, where like I'd be shocked if these 1s and 2s and even the 3 seeds go down early to like an 11 seed in the second round, because it hasn't happened all year. You really rarely have seen teams ranked that highly lose. And that's probably a little predictive and maybe reflective on last year too, with the separation that we got with great Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games and a few upsets early. I'm okay with that generally, Isaac. Maybe people won't love it in the opening weekend of the tournament if we don't get a bunch of big upsets. But man, there are some titans atop the sport.
No question. And I was doing this thought exercise a little bit based off of Warren's piece about, which you should check out on Basket and Review, basically about how like the gap between the top 10 and the rest of the sport is maybe wider now than it's ever been. And so to pair off that, I was like going through some of the mid-major rosters, like what can you even expect from a mid-major team to be able to hold up against some of these titans that have just so much skilled size. And not to make it about college football, but sometimes I'm starting to think more about it in like the college football perspective of like height, weight, and speed. It almost feels like more than ever in basketball, like you have to have height, weight, and speed in order just to be able to hold serve against some of these, enormous teams at the top of the sport that have great size, great shooting, forwards that can just destroy you at the rim, super athletic. It's not a long list of mid-majors that you can get to that have that type of height, weight, and speed, which is why a team like Belmont interests me a little bit, because they do kind of have some of that front court power. Even like a team like Hawaii could be an interesting one as well if they could get in, because they have that big time size inside. So I don't know if Hawaii's guards plays good enough. They scare me a lot when I'm watching late night Hawaii basketball, but it's kind of an interesting thought exercise, because as you're illustrating, the teams at the top are absolute wagons.
I'm grinning because there will be an athletic mailbag, a mailbag coming at The Athletic on Wednesday morning when people are listening to this. And one of the questions was, there hasn't been a mid-major 12 or 13 seed that's gone to the Sweet 16 since. Do you know, Isaac? There's a trivia question for you. It's really hard. If you know it, my mind would be blown.
A 12 or 13 seed?
A mid-major 12 or 13. So not the Oregon State Pac-12 run. It's been a while.
I have no idea where even to begin.
2013 LaSalle.
Wow.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. So we haven't had that like 12 seed darling. And the question was, who's most likely to do it? And Belmont was one of my first answers, Hawaii, and maybe someone from the Big West. I put Stephen F. Austin in there too, because they've got Colonel, the big rim protector, but he's only like 195 pounds. So that could hurt.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. I'm trying to think of some of the other mid majors off the top of my head that like I don't see it with. Like
I don't see it with Liberty. I don't see it with Yale. I don't see it with Miami.
I don't see it with Miami, Ohio. That's what I was going to say too. Like that team, I think top 150 teams or top 200 teams are shooting like 64% at the rim against Miami, Ohio. Their top rim protector is Antoine Woolfolk, who's a former like Rutgers player. So he's a high major type of athlete, but like that type of interior defense, that scares me. That really scares me. And yeah, I mean, it is, if we can get past some of those first round matchups, you kind of look at bracket matrix, you're like, oh my Lord, like we could have some absolute doozies on that second weekend. Luckily for us, second weekend's in Chicago. So like right in our backyard, we're going to have some absolute bangers, I hope.
That's what we're hoping for. Yeah, just put in for my credentials for the United Center. So hopefully those get stamp of approval, and we'll be there in person for some epic ones. Friday, Sunday site, which I like. I'm excited about that. Okay, Isaac, back to you for your second stat.
Okay, my second stat is 8.01, and that is the BPR rating for Aiden Holloway. In my head, I've been thinking about Aiden Holloway, and I'm like, man, every time I watch him, I think he's better than Mark Sears. Well, if you go on BPR, which you find on evanmaya.com, Aiden Holloway has an 8.01 BPR this year. Mark Sears had 7.90 last year. So if your eyes are telling you that Aiden Holloway is better than Mark Sears, and the numbers are telling you that Aiden Holloway is better than Mark Sears, it's a nice little combination. I think it's an interesting thought exercise moving forward of how we are supposed to talk about this Alabama team, because Charles Bediako is not going to play for the rest of the year. I think we're all thrilled about that type of result for what it means for free agency. But I still think that this team is extremely, extremely scary, because LeBaron Philon's awesome. Amari Allen, we've seen that as a really, really awesome player. And Aiden Holloway has become a better player than Mark Sears. 17 points a game this year, 3.8 assists, 2.5 rebounds, 44% from three, 53% from two, 81% at the line. His little runner floater thing is one of the best shots in all of college basketball. Almost a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He's just been awesome. There's one game on his slate where he wasn't really good, but that was just fresh off an injury, and he still had 8 dimes in that one showing too. It's like he's a really, really dynamic player. And I think there's some questions of how many avenues Alabama can exhaust to win basketball games. And I don't think they're a title contender because of the issues on the glass. Like I'm just saying that right there. But if it gets into a shot making contest, like they have the guys who can win those. And like, even if it is only one avenue, their fastball can be really, really electric, because, Holloway is Mark Sears with just like half the limelight and half the attention this year.
Yep. And just looking back I think they got a lot of flack for losing right away when they had Bediako. They lost at home to Tennessee. It's like, well, they didn't have Holloway or Amari Allen. That's more important than adding Bediako in his first game. And so it was kind of harsh to judge him for that. They turned it over a bunch at Florida and got slaughtered in the paint, and I think that's going to happen to them when they play up against size like that. But their shot making upside, as you mentioned, especially with Holloway, whose range is just so unlimited. It's good off the bounce. You can't really fully prepare for that. Yeah, the Tide are fun. How good, like, is it going to be last year where they make 27 threes against BYU and we get to see that kind of a rainmaker game? Who knows? But for pure aesthetics, I'm a huge Tide fan.
Yeah, and again, like just reiterating, I'm not saying Alabama's winning the title this year. If we're making our tier 1 title contenders, Alabama's not on that list for the rebounding and things that we've gotten into. I just think that like the narrative around Alabama this year has been a lot of like LeBaron Philon's this SEC Player of the Year contender, and I think Holloway is quietly having an amazing season, and his brilliance is really something that I think that like just kind of goes to show like the power of those year 2 transfers. I think if you're able to keep a transfer for that second year, you're able to see good things tend to really happen more often than not.
That's Isaac telling you folks to watch out for Jaleel Bethea next year for Alabama. It's the first hint.
If they can keep him and some plucky mid-major doesn't come in and try to buy low.
Exactly. All right, I'm going to keep it in the SEC. My next number is plus 2.9. That is the wins above bubble accumulated by Kentucky since January 1st, which is the 11th most in the country. And this is despite playing like the 44th best team per Bartorvik's efficiency. So they haven't been that good, but they've won big games. The only other team, I guess the next team in WAB that's outside the top 40 is UCF all the way down at 29th. So like winning has corresponded to playing well for almost everybody but Kentucky. But they found a way. Like I think they're starting to figure out some of their best lineups. They obviously got another big one over this, another big win over this weekend. One that I certainly didn't really expect. I'll own that. But they've kind of figured out their size. The point guard issue isn't as limiting right now, and maybe that's part of being in the SEC where there's not a ton of pressure defenses that are flipping you over and trying to force that kind of turnover. But finding ways to win matters. I'm just kind of keeping an eye open on Kentucky as like there could still be a stretch of fading because they're kind of outperforming what their underlying metrics are telling us.
And they have the toughest remaining schedule in the SEC. So like that is something that I think is going to come up and bite them a smidge. I don't think they're going to win the SEC championship because if you like kind of look at their schedule, it's, Florida on the road on Saturday. Then you have Georgia at home. That's not a gimme. Auburn on the road. That's not a gimme. South Carolina on the road. That's probably not a gimme. You still have Vanderbilt. You still have Texas A&M. Then you have to play Florida again. So like those are some pretty tough games for Kentucky moving forward. I will say I like the Jelovich addition to the lineup. I think he's not a star, but I think he does kind of connect the dots a little bit better. He's a good playmaker. The ball doesn't stick in his hands too much. He gets it out. He's not racking up like gaudy assist numbers, but I think the ball just moves a little bit better and the spacing's just a smidge better when he's on the floor at the 4. And credit to Mark Pope. They've made enough adjustments to make it work. Denzel Aberdeen has gotten more pick and roll usage as of late. For the most part, Otega Owe is not playing like the worst, SEC player of the year, preseason SEC player of the year of all time. And Malachi Moreno is a total beast, like an absolute total tank. And he's somebody that I think I really hope that they can keep him because I think he would be a really dynamic, impactful two-way player next year. I'm just worried that, even in an NBA draft class that's filled with so many good bigs, somebody could be a little bit enamored by Moreno.
Yeah, I remember early in the year I watched Moreno. I was like, just kind of another highly rated big body that's more project. And then I wrote about the freshman class, and he's highly rated in like every analytic. He's much better than I realized, and the production's really out there now too. The moving Jelovich into the starting lineup, I saw a couple Kentucky fans say that's like helping guard Diabate from foul trouble too, like keeping him out of his own way because he's so aggressive and such a good defender. You get a little further into the game before he starts hacking, and that's, I think, gone well for the Wildcats too.
Keep teams out of the bonus.
Yes, it's important. It's wild, but it's important. Okay, let's see. I think we're both through. Are we both through 3, or do you have to give a third?
I do have to give my third. My third is
That's right. I jumped the gun because we had double St. John's. That's why.
That's right. Okay. All the Johnnies talk. All right, now let's pivot to the Big Ten. Michigan is holding teams to 43.7% effective field goal percentage in the second half. That is number one amongst all high major teams, number three nationally. Jim, if you get the two teams that are ahead of them in second half defense in this category, I will be stunned. I will give you two hints. One is one of the best mid majors in college basketball. The other has a bunch of Europeans on their roster.
Okay, well, wait, is the European one, is that UT Martin?
Ding, ding.
Okay, all right, I got one. And then one of the best mid majors. Well, just based on the fact that they're way up there in effective field goal percentage generally, I'll guess SLU.
2 for 2. This is why you're a pro.
Yes.
So that's your top three of second half defenses. But to go back to Michigan, I think the eye test is also matching up for the numbers in this one. I watch Michigan. I'm like, teams are just got to be exhausted in the second half. You got to box out every trip because they're flying to the offensive glass. You got to sprint back in transition like crazy because they're pushing it ahead in transition for as quickly as possible to try to get easy buckets. And I think it's just wearing teams down over and over and over again. So we all know like second half offense is going to be a little bit ticked up just because of the late game fouling. That's like a pretty common thing. But like Michigan's defense in the second half is a result of the roster build that Dusty May has put together and the relentless, never-ending pressure that they put on you for the first 33 minutes of the game. And I think it's going to show up late. It kind of doubles down the fact to me that if you're going to get Michigan, you better do your work early because you might not have enough energy in the tank to reel off a comeback late.
Yeah, you're going to need to do what Wisconsin did and start the second half with like 8 straight made threes or whatever that was. Where it's like, all right, I guess this is not sustainable, but one of the things I love about Michigan is the Ade Mata like outlet passes. He's not quite Kevin Love, but it's perfect for the way they want to play. You know, get up and down, get the ball out of the basket, or get a defensive rebound and go. They're 60th nationally in bench minutes. Like they kind of go almost 10 deep and can just hit you in waves. Obviously, they can hit you in waves in the paint, and their guards are actually pretty darn deep too. You mentioned earlier with St. John's, there's no perfect roster build. There's probably a couple Michigan fans who are like, nah, hey, wait a second. What about us? Like, what about our build? I'm sure they'd like a little bit more shooting, but it's hard to complain about what they've done. And the second half, I think there's some merit to it. Like, you know, Michigan State, they got up big, but Ohio State, the one game, I think it was at Michigan, where it was like close until like 10 minutes left, and then they went on that big turbo run. Obviously, everything in Vegas, they just smoked some teams in both halves. But I would not envy anybody trying to figure out, like, all right, down the stretch, what are we drawing up against that giant front line with some athletic big guards? I don't really know what you do. And that's why I think we're going to get some of those like top teams pretty easily through to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, and see some major battles. Like we just watched Arizona, Kansas last night when we were recording this, and that I was like in awe of the battles in the paint in that game.
Yeah. I think the Michigan one that stood out to me the most was their Nebraska game. Nebraska did so well kind of finding avenues against that pressure. And then late, it was just like, I can't do this again. Like seriously, again, Merez Johnson's flying down the thing and I have to box him out again. And oh, here comes the day. And it's just like, it just never ends. And I think Nebraska went 3.5 minutes without scoring a point to close that game. A real reason why they didn't end up winning that game. And yeah, you're right. Like they're just relentless. They're an avalanche. That's the thing I keep thinking about with Michigan over and over again.
Yeah, it's a great example of the Nebraska game. Yeah, you mentioned like the drought to end the game. They had 2 points in the final 6.5 minutes. Like, what do you do? What do you do when that team tightens the screws? It feels a little like Duke early in the season. They kind of had that where the last 5 minutes of every game they just squeezed. Like Kansas, they did it too. Arkansas, they did it too. I think Michigan State, they did it to them. And it's tough, man. When you got a bunch of big athletes that can really ratchet it up, it gets really tough to score. All right, number 4 for me. I mentioned Duke. I'm going to pivot to their rival. The stat is 5 for 10, and that's what UNC was on layups against Duke in their win. They only had 10 attempts on layups. They had no dunk attempts. Caleb Wilson leads the country in dunks, so for them to not have any, that's pretty notable. They only had 4 offensive rebounds. So to win that game with basically not getting easy chances, second chances, their average 2-point attempt distance was 8.4 feet, which is the 5th percentile per KenPom. So they're taking a lot of jumpers, and Duke probably got easier baskets, especially early in that game. But every guy who played 10 plus minutes hit a 3. And that's how you overcome like a night or only a 7% chance to win the game when they were down 68-62 late. I couldn't believe like the fact that I went back and forth with a heel fan on Twitter, and he's like, we didn't get, or maybe it was a Duke fan. It's like they didn't get layups or dunks and they still beat us.
Wild. And they only shot, I mean, it wasn't like they had some huge free throw advantage either. I mean, they shot 14 free throws and Duke shot 6. So it wasn't like some crazy number there. Yeah.
Yeah, but
when I was,
UNC only had 7 fouls, Isaac. That's what I'm hearing from the Duke fans.
well, and on the other hand, all I'm seeing is like Duke doesn't know how to run late game offense again, even though they got 3 straight right hand layups for their best players and ran the same action that, they kind of run that ghost screen action where Isaiah Evans sets a ghost screen for Cameron Boozer. Carolina switched it right. Boozer got the mismatch, the whole thing. It's just the hindsight analysis for late game stuff like that sometimes drives me nuts because it's always based on like what happened, not like the process.
Yeah, it's different than last year early in the season when I felt like there at least 2 games where it ended up with Cooper Flag driving left, and you're like, let's at least get it in his strong hand. Well, now they've gotten Cam Boozer's strong hand. He had a tough finish over Vesar. It didn't quite go. If that goes in, suddenly we're thinking very differently about the result of that game. So the margins are thin. I'm not going to call it luck. I'll call it variance. That's what we'll call it. But we mentioned UNC at the top with a lot of momentum right now. Out west, both their opponents made like 50% of their threes, Cal and Stanford. And as opponent shooting has come back down to earth, suddenly they look a lot more potent defensively. They're way up there in the longest twos they give up because of the drop coverage. They give up basically nothing on rim and threes per CBB analytics. So I think there's some sustainability there. And I feel like every week is Hubert going to be back or not? Looks very much like Hubert's going to be back because this team is actually playing quite well.
I also think that they shrink the floor a little bit better when Jaren Stevenson gets to play the 3. And, their guard issues have been well documented, right? Like Kyan Evans, I think all of the red flags with him and the portal scouting stuff have definitely showed up. Another example of why transferring from an offense that's rapidly different to it is a little scary. But they shrink the floor better when Jaren Stevenson's on the floor, and they actually get floor spacing from Stevenson. So I kind of think that like you might just have to ride with it. It could be matchup dependent moving forward, but I think Stevenson at the 3, Wilson at the 4, Vesar at the 5, and then pick 2 of the best 3 guards on whoever's playing well that given night is their best lineups because defensively they can cover a bit more ground.
And they've locked in with Dixon in the starting lineup now, which I think has worked really well, pairs well with Trimble, and it makes Bogavats like your microwave guy, which feels like maybe his destiny. Just come in, get some shots up, don't really worry about getting in the flow. But Dixon has fit that well, and yeah, Kyan Evans. The amount of jokes I've seen about how many points he's going to average at Minnesota next year, they're appropriate. That's the kind of joke that should be made, I think, following Cade Tyson footsteps.
Yeah. I would do anything to play with Nico Medved too. So like you do what you do what you got to do. All right. Is it my turn for I think I'm going to stick in the Big Ten too. Here's another one. Plus 18.4. That is Michigan State's net rating with Jordan Scott on the floor against top 100 teams.
Wow.
So we're starting to build a real sample size here as Scott has become like the starting 2 guard for Michigan State. And, I think they do sacrifice some things with him on the floor at the 2. They don't have quite as much creation. He's not somebody that I think you're going to see initiate a bunch of pick and rolls right now. It just kind of forces even more onto Jeremy Fears' plate. But I think defensively, I was impressed with him in the Illinois game. I thought he held up pretty well against Keaton Wagler and multiple switches there. And again, the size with Michigan State can have when Scott's at the 2 is pretty nuts. Like it's 6'8", Jordan Scott at the 2. Cohen Carr is 6'7" Jackson Kohler, 6'9", Carson Cooper, a good 7-footer inside, like 4 guys that are 6'7" or taller all on the floor together at one time is not nothing. And I think for already a well-schooled defense like Michigan State's that really sops the gaps up and really eliminates driving lanes, recovers extremely well, forces you to kind of leaves you with threes that are contested. They don't give you threes, they just kind of leave you with them. I think getting Scott in there certainly gives Michigan State a little bit of a different gear. He got picked on a bit against Minnesota defensively. Langston Reynolds drove him pretty well a few times. And I think he will struggle in certain matchups, but against some of the slower teams that they could see, I think Scott at the 2 is a real advantage. And I think the sample size is growing here that Michigan State's best lineups include him.
Yeah, Tang obviously hit a huge shot against Illinois late, but for the defensive identity that Tom Izzo wants to build, they're already incredible in transition defense. So if you have to execute against a half court defense that has the two towers inside, you've got Scott and Carr on the wings, two great athletes, and then Fears is, for whatever you think of him, a hound on the ball. Like, it is not fun to have to bring it up against him to initiate offense. It's just not easy to score against that team, especially you don't get any second chances. You're going to have to find something on that first shot. So yeah, playing that bigger lineup is clearly valuable for them. And I know they lost at Minnesota. I'm not going to fully condemn them for that. But the Illinois win was a major bounce back. They've got a couple coming up: Wisconsin, UCLA, Ohio State, that are very winnable before the schedule again stiffens down the stretch. Where are you at with Sparty? Is that I think Will and I've talked about, we think Final Four contender, not title contender. Where do you land with them?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the talent is still something that like keeps me from going all in on them as a team that could, win it all. I think especially when you saw them play against Michigan, it was like, all right, they have the better point guard, but at the 2, Michigan was more talented. At the 3, Michigan is more talented. You take Axel Lenneborg over, Cohen Carr. Like at the 4, I'm taking Merez Johnson over Jackson Kohler. At the 5, I'm taking a Demara over Carson Cooper. So like I think some of the matchups that they have, there's just not quite enough pop with that group. But they can certainly find a way, I think, into the second weekend, and then you just kind of go from there. You see kind of what the draw materializes. Every time I think about Michigan State, I think about what this team would look like with Trey Holloman on the roster, or with a guy like Jace Richardson if he had come back for his second year. One of those two guys being on this team, I think, would do a world of difference, because there's going to be times moving forward where like they don't have another real ball handler that I trust now that Divine Ugochukwu is out for the rest of the season with a foot injury.
Yeah, it's tough that two of their biggest portal snags, Ugochukwu and Caleb Glenn, are not going to be able to contribute at all in March. Glenn's out for the entire season. They're hoping to get more spacing, more wing play from him, and that's just not going to be the case. But yeah, to your point, get to the second weekend, figure it out. I feel like that's always been Izzo's strategy. Big back to some of his teams that, when he was making the Final Four every 3 to 4 years, and every single graduating class at least made the Final Four once. Not at all those teams were national title good, but they manufactured a couple wins in the slowed down environment of the NCAA tournament, out physicaled a few teams at the Sweet 16, Elite 8 when the nerves start coming in. And that's all it takes. I think back to like 2015 when Travis Trice and Dawson went to the Final Four. That team wasn't title good. This one's obviously better this year, but just getting a bunch of stops and having a great point guard can go a long way.
No question. And I know that analytics don't show it now, but I do think that Michigan State on a night-to-night basis can be the most disruptive, best defense in all of college basketball. I think that that's in their range of potential outcomes, even if they're 5th or 6th on KenPom in adjusted efficiency defensively.
Yep. Okay. My next thought is I'm going to the mid-major realm. The number is 12, and that is the Big West Conference ranking per KenPom, and it is the second straight year that the Big West has landed there. They've usually been like more 15th to 20th, kind of your run-of-the-mill. They got some good top-end teams, but the middle and the bottom can really fade out. But man, this year, it's just been terrific. I love staying up late to watch this conference. I think any of the top 3 can win a game. UC Irvine, Hawaii, UC Santa Barbara. I think Irvine, Hawaii are excellently coached. They've got great interior defensive front courts. Santa Barbara's kind of more, the talent overwhelms at times, but you get Aiden Mahaney from St. Mary's and UConn, and Miro Little from Utah and Baylor. Like, these guys are high level guards. And I know Little was away from the team, but they still took it to Irvine over the weekend. There's a really good upper echelon of this conference, and then you go to like CSUN and Riverside. UC San Diego had some big non-conference wins. Like, I've just been impressed by how well this conference has built up, how entertaining it is to watch, and I can't wait for the conference tournament, and B, whoever comes out of it, I think that is going to be a brutal draw for whoever gets them in the NCAA tournament.
It's a great point. I think right now you have 7 teams that are in the top 180 on KenPom. Like, I think there's just a lot of competent rosters, just competent over and over and over again. I think at Irvine, When I've watched them, like Kyle Evans, their big man inside, has been one of the most valuable players in the league. Just outstanding rim protection there. The thing with Santa Barbara that stood out to me is the young guys. Like CJ Shaw is a really, really good freshman guard that has helped them. Zion Sensley, I think is how you say his name, a sophomore, 6'8", kind of springy type of wing, big jumbo guard forward type.
He was like a top 100-ish recruit, I think, last year.
He can really play. And so I think like that, just like that little influx of talent has certainly made a difference. Irvine, I've caught them on some bad nights. So like maybe I don't feel for, you know what I mean? Like it's like one of those weird teams where if you catch them at the wrong time, like for me, like I watched them when they played Belmont at home and it was just like, oh Lord. And so
Yeah.
I think they lost that game by like 400. It felt like, but that they've really rebounded. And steered the ship back on track. And like I said earlier, second Hawaii mention of the thing, but Hawaii is really, really tough, connected defense. They have great size. I think they have 5 guys who are 6'8" or 6'9" that are taller in their rotation, get a little bit of everything from everybody. And that's a really good league, and it's fun. It's fun when a league like that has been able to hold serve in the portal picking era.
Yeah, you mentioned like just competent rosters. I don't know what NIL situations are like for some of these Big West schools. Maybe they're just playing ball in California and Hawaii really well, and that's probably something you can do. But they've gotten really strong down transfers. They've been able to pick off a couple like really good D2 transfers. Obviously, that's how UC San Diego built its team last year, was a lot of D2 guys, not just straight from UC San Diego, but picking them out like Tyler McGuy. So they've been smart and clever about the way they built the roster. They found talent. There's some really good coaches. I'm pumped to see whether that league can get one. I think it's been a long time since they've actually broken through. Hawaii beat Cal back in the Quanzo Martin era. That might be the last first round win that the Big West got. But I'm excited to see if they can get one this year.
It is fun. Be like, oh, they could be a really interesting 12 seed. Then you look at what the 5 seeds are. It's like Tennessee, St. John's, Carolina, Bama. You're like, oh, this is not.
Yeah.
Maybe Arkansas could get up to the 5. That's a mercurial group, I would say, kindly. That could be a little bit hot or cold. A young team, they're a little thin, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be really, really fun to see kind of what the draw is. I feel like my jury is still out on like this league and if they can actually win games in March until I see the draw. It feels like more draw dependent than a long time and how I can remember it.
Yeah, I'm looking at like I wouldn't mind if you get a BYU 5 seed, although Debansa can probably just carry him past. But man, that team was like even with Delaware in a half earlier this season. So I've seen them be exposed against some mid-major teams. I don't know if Gonzaga dropping down to a 5 would feel doable for a mid-major or not. Maybe not if Huff's back. That's kind of a worry there.
Clemson doesn't overly blow me away with their athletes. They're good at what they do, but they don't have like dynamic guard play. So maybe you could see them being a little bit more vulnerable against a team like Hawaii or something like that can match up with them in that front line.
Yeah, I guess McNeese got them as a 5 seed last year. So that's a great example. Perfect example.
Yeah. All right. I'll stick in mid-major world too. 7 is my number here. And that's the number of road wins that Santa Clara has eclipsed this year. They just won 3 road games in a row, kind of a weird schedule quirk. Loyola Marymount, Pacific, and Washington State. And this is the most road wins that Santa Clara has ever done in the Herb Sendek era and the most in the program history since 2012, 2013, when they got that number by playing in the NIT where you get to play home games or road games in there. So like what they're doing right now on the road as road warriors is pretty special in Santa Clara's like kind of history of basketball. And, I don't have a lot of like groundbreaking analysis with Santa Clara because my main point that I keep looking at with them is like, they just have 9 good players. And that's something that like really is impactful. When you have 9 good players that can come onto the floor, you can find that you're 5 that work on a given night and come out and play. Like it really works. And I think I have to walk around with like Kleenexes to clean up people's like drool over Alan Graves. Like he is like one of everybody and their mother loves Alan Graves. And I do too. He's an awesome player, but this group has a lot of really this rotation has a bunch of really competent options in it. I think Christian Hammond is starting to play some of the best basketball I've seen from him. Elijah Mahi has long been one of my favorite guys. I really liked him in moments last year, and he's starting to put it together a little bit this year. Sash Gavalaguv has given them a little bit of a jolt at times. Bucky Oboye is a big-time rim protector inside who has great size. Obviously, an elite role player in Jake Ensminger. So they just have a lot of really, really competent pieces on this roster. And the work they're doing on the road is historic and super impressive.
And they're the best team in college basketball with a former G Leaguer on it, right? Thierry Darlin. That's going to get everybody excited about that.
Eighth man Thierry Darlin.
That's right. That tells you how good they are. Hopefully, folks. The guy came from the G League and is just filling a role for them. It's shockingly Herb Sendek's best team. Like we talked a little bit about them on stats, but they just keep winning. And so they warrant more mention, and they really do, because on Saturday, on Valentine's Day, they've got Gonzaga coming to town. And those are the only two teams in the conference with one loss. And Santa Clara put up a bit of a fight at Gonzaga in the first meeting, but Braden Huff had 12 points in that game, and he probably won't be participating in the rematch unless he makes a miracle comeback. I've just been shocked by how much they've kept winning. They've done so in tough environments. Washington State really pushed them this past Saturday. They were able to make it happen and get over the hump there. I saw a Field 68 headline about them getting on the bubble. I think it was Monday night, last night. Like, they've been on the bubble. They exist on the bubble right now. They're inside the top 40 at KenPom. Their wins above bubble are in NCAA tournament territory. And
41st in
Q4 loss. Yeah, it's just the Q4 loss that's killing them right now, the Loyola Chicago game. So I think we will see Herb Sendek in the NCAA tournament, provided they don't fully collapse down the stretch, and they've given no indication that they will.
And they're a team that I do think has, like, to go back to the height, weight, speed type of conversation, they have like the bodies and the athletes, I think, to go up against high major front courts that can try to brutalize them inside. I think the one downturn with them is just they're not very experienced. They're a pretty young group at times in some of the bigger, high leverage roles that they have. So like, you're going to be putting a lot of trust in some underclassmen to make good decisions against elite defenses. That's going to be something that I think could potentially trip them up, but the personnel is really talented, really, really talented.
Yep. Don't look ahead to Gonzaga. Take care of business against Seattle on Wednesday night. That's our message to you, Broncos.
Tough team. Tough Seattle team.
All right. My number 6 stat, I realized I hinted at BYU previously, but the number for them, a team with no momentum right now, as mentioned at the top, 1.23. That is their points per possession allowed combined over their last 6 games. And they've lost 5 of those 6. In that stretch, starting on January 17th, per Bart Torvik, would you like to guess what their defense ranks, Isaac?
148th.
220th. So they are really not guarding anybody. Part of this is opposing three-point shooting. They're up over 42%. That's tough. But they're also allowing, they're 353rd in turnover rate, 281st in 2-point percentage defense. Yes, some schedule influence here, as their Big 12 schedule has really stiffened up. Arizona, Kansas, Texas Tech, Houston are 4 of their 5 losses. But if they want to go where they want to go in March, they've got to be able to tighten the screws a little bit against these top teams. And they need to be able to play 2 halves. I think Will and I have talked about their splits some on this show already. Just really struggled in first halves, getting down like double digits. They kind of cut it closer to Houston at halftime, but Kansas smashed them early. Arizona smashed them early. Texas Tech got them down early. You go back to Clemson and UConn. All those teams really put them down early. They've got to be able to find a way to play all 40 minutes. And it's surprising to see them be a second half team because they don't have much depth. It's, 3 guys making all the offensive plays. They've lost some rotation guards to injuries. But man, I don't know exactly how you solve the defense. And I think coming into the year, we were worried about the personnel, and it's starting to really flare up.
I thought 1.23 was going to be the number of assists that everyone else on the roster on BYU averages that aren't the big 3, because it feels just like they have no creation from anybody other than those 3 guys. And you understood the roster build. I understood it with like the big 3 and then role players that will buy into their role and can do a specific job at a high level. But some of the like sometimes Kebaketa like has kind of let them down at times this year. Like he's got to be somebody that they can trust to play more than 20 minutes a game. His interior finishing against Houston really was a problem, and they would have probably won that game if he had made some more bunnies inside. Obviously, the free throws, missing some of those free throws have hurt too. And I think that the point about Dawson Baker, like you said, they've missed some guards. Losing Dawson Baker, I think, is a really big key because he was just kind of a veteran that one, he was cheap. Two, he makes open shots. Three, he makes good decisions with the ball in his hands. And four, he can run pick and rolls. And I think he could just kind of connect some of the dots for some of that, for that group. Not having him, BYU is missing him at a really high level. And speaking of that, that's another team that went into the G League, got a big man, and Abdullah Ahmed, I believe is his name, has not been as much of a difference maker as they would have hoped.
Yeah, I'm almost there. Looking up their numbers when Saunders, Wright, and Debanza all share the court together versus any of them off the floor, because then you really start to lean on everybody else. Okay, yeah, so they're 89th percentile net rating with all three on. It's not that bad, actually, with only two of them on the floor, which surprises me a little bit. But yeah, they don't get a lot of interior finishing. And Kevin Young lamented that after the Houston game, like you're talking with Keita, not being able to knock in those buckets. They can't throw it in for a post touch. There's just not a lot besides Wright or Devanza, you go get a bucket, or Saunders, you fly off a tough screen and hit it with your feet not set. They've got a little bit to figure out. Talent's there. The upside, they've showed it in the second half against Arizona, the second half against UConn, second half against Clemson. But they've got to put the pieces together a little bit more, both defensively and just kind of finding the right role players.
And they're not far away either. Like they had a chance to potentially like win that game late against Arizona, right? Like they had a chance to beat Houston. That game was there for the taking for them. I think they had a lead in the second half, I want to say. Could have easily won Kansas. Could have easily won the Oklahoma State game. Like Texas Tech, I didn't have that one. They kind of got blitzed in a little bit for the most part. But yeah, for the most part, no, I lied. Texas Tech, they're up 61-52
up
with 8 to go.
halfway through.
Yeah. So they're not that far away. It feels like some of the issues with this group have it feels like they just have been exacerbated, and they haven't been able to cover up some of the margins in the margins.
Yeah, I'm glad you made the Baker point, because just looking back at what he provided them last year, shot making, a 15% assist rate. For a role player to have a 15% assist rate on this year's team would be a miracle for them. That's not happening. So having a smart veteran ball mover like that is clearly a void on this roster right now.
They could use Dallin Hall, who transferred to Virginia. They could really use him right now. And you understand why? Like if you're going to have a chance to upgrade your point guard room and bring in a Rob Wright, like you do that every single day of the week and twice on Sundays. But Dallin Hall leaving and then Baker obviously getting hurt have been killers. And I would have been stunned if in the preseason you told me in mid-February we're talking like Dawson Baker's injury is a reason why BYU isn't reaching its ceiling, but it's kind of where it's kind of turned into.
Yep. They've got more chances too. The Big 12 is not kind. They're at Baylor the night we're recording this. We'll talk about it I don't know if we got to rename Stradamus, or we'll just kind of tribute to our certainly our missing king right now. But they've also got Arizona on the road and Iowa State at home, UCF at home. Like those are solid needle movers. And I think we'll see maybe a little where BYU has moved to after this first tough stretch that they've played in.
Okay.
All right. So we're back to you for number 6. Yep.
All right. Do you want a good one or a bad one? I can't decide which one I want to give. They're kind of two opposites.
Let's start with the bad one, because I just went bad and we're going to end on a good one for me too.
Okay. So here's my bad one. Kansas State is minus 135 in free throw attempt differential this year. That is dead last among all high majors, according to CBB Analytics. And it breaks my brain because you went out into the portal and got PJ Haggerty, who is one of the elite foul drawing guards in college basketball, and you have a minus 135 free throw attempt differential. It makes no sense. But that is welcome to Jerome Tang basketball, I guess. It's just the weirdest thing, and one of the weirdest stats that I would have that I've kind of been able to uncover, because it doesn't jive with how you feel about this roster.
Yeah. Oh, as you started saying it, I had to kind of think about it. I was like, that doesn't seem right. Haggerty's taken 114 more free throws than anybody else on the team. I was checking to see if he'd taken a full half of their free throws. It's not quite there. He's taken 157 of their 382. it just nobody else gets to the line. I think they kind of swung and missed on a big man in the not or in the off season. They were trying to get that Bryce Dessert. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his French last name correctly, but they weren't able to get him over there. End up with Doran Buka, who's just more of a defender, a body, and nobody else really gets downhill in the backcourt. So it's Haggerty and nobody else. And I know we're kind of, punching down with K-State. Their fans know that they aren't it this year, and they probably want to be able to pay the buyout for Jerome Tang. It's like $18 million, I think Trilly said on Basket Under Review. But they may end up with him one more year, and he's just got to show a little more flexibility and really intelligence in the way he spends his money. Because you can't spend $2.5 million on Andre Kostic and expect to have a competent Big 12 team.
Yeah, I think the biggest question I had is just why spend the money on Kostic and spend the money on Bashir when they had a lot of the same strengths and a lot of the same weaknesses? That they're both 3-point shooters that can't guard. And so I think that Kansas State ran into issues where it's they could only play one or the other. And it just is what it is. And maybe their intel was a little bit bad. Maybe the scouting was a little bit bad on what Kostic could actually do defensively. He's a little bit older, but he still hasn't been able to find a way to get stops. But there's also some unluckiness here too, just with the big man pursuit, the injuries that they've had. I know Rapi K got hurt. I think that's how you say his name. McGriff has missed time. And so it's just it stinks for them in that regard, but they also kind of got themselves into this mess in the beginning with some of the curious roster building decisions. And one extra note on that foul attempt, free throw attempt differential thing there, it also speaks a lot to their bigs that can't defend without fouling. Buka is a walking foul, McGriff walking foul, and that's just life for Kansas State right now. They're constantly losing the free throw battle on a night-to-night basis. And I thought one of their biggest strengths in the preseason with Haggerty on the roster has become one of their biggest weaknesses.
Yeah. And I'm just imagining if there's a chance they weren't going to get Haggerty, and what would this team look like if they didn't have him? And it was Nate Johnson and David Castillo as their best backcourt players and no front court either. It could have been a nightmare without him. He's a ceiling or a floor raiser. It's a floor raiser, and unfortunately, their floor is not even that high, even with him.
Yeah, he's honestly had a fine year. Some of the efficiency numbers haven't been great. If you want to do that, but from a counting stats perspective, if you told me you were getting 24, 5, and 4, I'd probably take that every single day of the week. And you'd think Kansas State was going to be a decent team, but it just hasn't coalesced.
He has a slightly higher effective field goal percentage than last year, a slightly higher assist rate. I know he's playing in the Big 12 versus the American, but it's not like he's fallen off a cliff. It's just the surrounding talent has not been enough. All right, let's end on a positive note. We both apparently have one. I've got my 7th one left because we had a crossover. So I'm going to let you go 2 in a row here, Isaac. You can add to your 7.
All right. I was looking up the best transition killers. There's only 10 players in the high major ranks that are scoring 5 or more points per game in transition alone this year. And there's some fun names here. So Jeremiah Wilkinson from Georgia is number 1 at 6 points a game. Kind of makes sense, right? You see with what they try to do, but he's just dynamic, and the open floor has been terrific. Abuka Akori at Stanford, quick as a jet, right? Just an absolute flamethrower who can get after it in transition. I feel like he has jet fuel attached to his feet. Otega Owe at Kentucky has bounced back a little bit, 5.8 points a game in transition. Jaron Pierre from SMU, you'd kind of expect that. PJ Haggerty, welcome back, old friend, 5.6 points a game in transition. Here's one that's fun. Jameer Jones from Providence, 5.6 points a game in transition.
Oh, wow.
And they're the most fun transition points. They're he catches it at half court, he takes 2 dribbles, doesn't matter who's in front of him, 2-hand dunk. Just flying up the floor. You'll get a charge too, but he sends the defender in the 3rd row where it's just oh, that wasn't really fun to take that charge. I probably don't want to do it again. He's super athletic, super fun, makes a lot of mistakes, but makes some great plays too. And he's been a delightful watch for a Providence team that's honestly a mess. Braden Burries is on this list. Nick Boyd, your boy from Wisconsin, has been just terrific. It's kind of amazing seeing a Wisconsin player being one of the elite transition scorers in college basketball, but I'm kind of rewiring my brain on how Wisconsin basketball works. And then 2 more. Darius Acuff from Arkansas, kind of expected. Just, again, he is the thunder of this group for Arkansas. Just big, broad shoulders, just blows by dudes. And then Anthony Pig Johnson from Arizona State, giving him a major jolt, 5 points a game in transition. So those are your 10 transition killers at the high major ranks this season.
Man, I'm trying to remember which game I watched Pig Johnson play. I think it was one of the games in Maui. And just like the second he catches the ball, he's like, how can I get my head to the rim? How fast can I get there? I don't care who's in the way. I don't care how fast I got to go. Man, yeah, that's an interesting group. I was wondering if there'd be like a Michigan player in there because they play so fast in transition, but they must be so balanced that they haven't quite snuck anybody up to that level. But Corey, Acuff, telling you about the quality of this freshman class too. And there's fun players everywhere, and I think if we're going to be rewarded with the tournament, kind of the pace isn't quite up in the sport, but again, like the efficiency being a little higher, there's a few more points, and teams know the value of transition possessions, so it makes a lot of sense.
And defenses know like that transition points are so important that they're trying to take them away even more now than ever before with various strategies. I think we're seeing tagging up on offensive rebound attempts where they try to like, hey, send multiple guys to the glass because then that makes them have to box us out, which keeps us from running. It's kind of some of the Houston Rockets type of game plan in the NBA. But yeah, teams are trying to take away transition points more and more than ever. And some of these guys are just so good or in the right situations that they're maximized. Like Pig Johnson is a heat-seeking missile in transition, but it certainly helps to play with Mo Odom, who loves to get the ball out of his hands early and push it ahead in the open floor.
Yep, exactly. All right, we're going to end out west with a guy that earned it this week with his play. The number is 26.5, and that is the points per game for Alijah Arenas over his last two outings at Penn State versus Indiana. Not like massive wins. I think they'll probably, Penn State might not even end up Q2, but beating Indiana at home was important for USC. And with Baker Mazzara injured, they needed some jolt offensively. And I guess with how good this freshman class is, we shouldn't be surprised that a guy that was like top 10 by every recruiting service is this good. But he struggled out of the gate when he finally got back from the meniscus tear, and he had the off-season car accident that probably helped or slowed his development. But man, you're seeing the skill level. I loved it on the final possession against Penn State. He got downhill. It wasn't a through the legs, pull up from three. He forced his way through a little bit of an off-balance drive, got to his right hand, and got it up high on the glass against a team that can't really protect the rim. So I think that's like good awareness too. But he can hit some threes. The usage has been way up. I'm wondering what we're going to see from USC down the stretch. If Baker Mazzara gets back in the lineup, how do they kind of have the tug of war offensively? It's become too much my turn, your turn, two guys that want to shoot and score. But Arenas emerging does make them more fun and more interesting down the stretch.
He is going to shoot that ball anytime he gets a touch. He gets it and he is ready to score, wired to score. He just moves like an NBA player. You see the long, wiry frame. He's really creative with some of his drives, kind of herky jerky, but also smooth. He makes some of the weirdest plays too, because I think he tried to throw an inbound or a post entry pass one time. It got deflected, ricocheted right back to him, and so he was like, "Well, I got the ball, might as well just shoot it," and drilled a 25-foot three. Like he just does odd things on the court. But great kid by everybody who talks about it. He says a great dude, really cares about winning. Didn't want to shut it down this year. Just really wanted to play and come back and hoop. And so that's always really encouraging. And he gives them definitely a real surge because he's also has great size. Like that's the beauty of like this USC team. Like they're enormous in certain possessions when they can, get Chad Baker Mazzara out there, get Jacob Kofi out there, get Ezra Asar out there. They have Arenas out there. That's four guys who are 6'6" or taller, and a lot of skilled size on that group. And they've had a ton of injury, poor luck, the most injured team, I think, according to Evan Maya, but they just find ways to win. And you're right. Like the your turn, my turn stuff can be a little bit revolting to watch at times, but I look at this roster. I'm like, I think I'd do the same thing too if I was Eric Musselman. Like, I think that's the best path for them to win and something they're going to have to lean on down the stretch.
Yeah, if they make the postseason, we know Muss has that kind of postseason surge. He had a couple of really good runs at Arkansas, Nevada as well. They know how to target mismatches when the game slows down, and teams get really good scouting reports going. They can win individual one-on-one matchups. I just wish we gotten to see this team healthy because I ranked them like 20th in the preseason, but Rodney Rice goes down. I think Amarian Dickerson was a huge loss, Horizon Defensive Player of the Year that was going to be impactful on that end. They didn't get Arenas until now. Now Baker Mazar is out. Like, imagine if they had all those guys for a full season. This team could look really different.
Or Keontae Jones, too, who was on the roster and then obviously ended up getting out of that and heading to Dayton. Like, if you told me there was a lineup of Rodney Rice, Alijah Arenas, Chad Baker Mazara, Keontae Jones or Marion Dickerson, and then Kofi at the 5, that's really, really fun. Eric Musselman just probably like punched a wall in frustration because he's definitely thought about these outcomes or lineups that he was envisioning. What do they have, a portal house in the summer? He definitely had these on the board in the portal house in the summer, and unfortunately, all of them fell to the cutting room floor.
I feel like I'll tell myself I almost cut in with at least high up on the wall was safe. But it's sorry, Eric, as I joke. I feel bad. Low hanging fruit for me. Yeah, it is. All right, that's our 7-stat rotation. We got to finish it out with the standard Wilstradamus as we are recording on Tuesday, so we do not know what's happening in Tuesday night's results. But we're going to tell you. We're gonna let you know. Will's always spot on with this, but Isaac, I'm going to go to you first. We're going to each give our takes because we got to somehow make up for the lack of Will Warren. But we got Vandy at Auburn, Purdue at Nebraska, BYU at Baylor. You got UNC's follow-up after the Duke win. They're headed to Miami, Florida. You even look at Wisconsin at Illinois. Any of these games really giving you a strong vibe in the universe, telling you what's going to happen?
So it's been how long since Purdue has gotten to play as the hunted, not the hunter? How often have we gotten them as an underdog this year? I think the Alabama game on the road is early, the one that I can think of off the top of my head. This group, the vibes are off with this group. I think the vibes flip back to being good tonight. And I think on Tuesday night, I think Purdue goes into Pinnacle Bank Arena and finds a way to win. Will always has creative numbers. So I think it'll be like 78-73, Purdue.
Okay. And matchup wise, man, it's not a situation where their lack of athletic wings is going to really burn them. There's not some Alijah Arenas on the other end of the court for Nebraska that's going to get downhill. Maybe Frager has a big game, but I like that. I think BYU gets a big win at Baylor. Just kind of handles them, maybe wins by 10, actually plays closer to 2 halves. I think there's a big wake-up call. It's definitely a step down in competition based on what they've been going against, some of those top Big 12 teams. Baylor's kind of riding high. They almost won one at Iowa State. But BYU by 6 to 10 is what I'm feeling there.
BYU by 17. I had that one written
down. Wow, he went over the top on me. I like that.
Yeah, no, I think BYU. I think BYU lays the lumber here. Every time I watch Baylor, there's just a talent gap that's just really stunning to me. Like, I think if you're power ranking the best 4 players on the floor, it could go BYU 1, BYU 2, Baylor 3, BYU 4. You know what I mean? Like, that's like the type of talent edge that they have. And I think that comes together tonight, especially against I think sometimes when you're trying to go after BYU, having a little bit of an interior force is certainly the way to go. And that's not a strength of this Baylor roster by any means.
Not at all. Like, one of the lowest post-up rates in the entire country. Speaking of kind of shellacking, I think Illinois just puts Wisconsin in the corner. Wisconsin has been playing solidly, but kind of getting away with some games at home. Illinois is coming off that very frustrating loss at Michigan State. Wagler played arguably his worst game of the season, 0 for 8 from 2. I just don't think Wisconsin has the athleticism to bother him. And I think you see Illinois by 15 plus in that game.
Interesting. I had it a little differently. I think that Nick Boyd could actually give Illinois some real issues. Again, Kylan Boswell is not expected to play tonight, and Illinois' struggles against speedy guards, I think, are pretty well documented. If Boyd can constantly get into the teeth of this defense, Illinois does a really good job of like taking away the rim now more than ever. They're fine giving up open threes, but that's like not a great recipe against Wisconsin for long stretches. So it really kind of comes down to like, do the jump shooters travel for the Badgers? And if they do, and Boyd's able to get in the middle of the floor and spray it, Illinois at this point, it feels like they're fine giving up open threes, and they'd rather give up an open 3 than give up anything at the rim. And it's a little different than normal Brad Underwood defenses. It's very bizarre, but if I kind of feel like Boyd's a tough matchup for Illinois across the board.
It's perfect. We covered both bases. One of us is right. We get to post the clip either way of one of us being intelligent. That's the way to go. That's what we're doing here. But we got to give a quick take on Vandy, Auburn, and UNC Miami. I'll say Vandy gets right on the road after that weird Oklahoma game. They almost had to come back from down 1 million. And I actually think UNC follows up the Duke win with another win. Miami's fading a little bit. I don't know what's going on with True Washington. I think Shelton Henderson's supposed to play, but maybe it's a little sluggish to start for the Heels. But I just like this version of them, the way they're playing in the backcourt that they're using.
Yeah, I like Carolina just schematically wise. I think they make sense against Miami. Like the Miami's brute force bully ball type of interior focus doesn't really work, I don't think, against this group. And Carolina does. The one underrated part about Carolina is that like they do have 5 different guards that they can rotate in and run pick and rolls. I think they have 5 guys of like 25 or more pick and roll reps so far this year. That's important against Miami because True Washington's such an elite defender. So whoever he takes, like I'm putting the other guard in the action as many times as possible and trying to kind of massage my way to open opportunities in that regard. I don't really have a good lean on Auburn Vandy. For some reason, I just kind of feel like Auburn is playing well and losing lately. That's kind of the vibe I've gotten with them. Like they've been executing way better defensively from the eye test that I've seen. Filip Jovic playing more has been awesome for them. Like he is, kind of have like this like idea of what a Euro big looks like, but Jovic is like mean and nasty and gets after it on the offensive glass. Sebastian Williams Adams is an absolute tank. Even like getting my guy Keyshawn Murphy healthy has certainly helped them too. Like, so I think that this front line for Auburn, while it's not like the most imposing, like physically huge group, I do think there's a lot of avenues for them to give Vanderbilt some issues. Duke Miles not playing. Frankie Collins is still not playing. I think that means Kevin Overton gets sent onto Tyler Tanner a ton. I think Auburn actually finds a way to get it done tonight.
Okay, there you have another split opinion so that we can be spot on and correct. All right, that's it for stats here. We've gone through our 7-stat rotation and a little Wilstradamus. Isaac, do you want to tell the people where they can find you? Any shows, any writing you want to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, Isaac_Trotter. You can see myself on CBSSports.com. And then we do a show on Fridays at noon on CBS Sports Network talking college basketball every week. So that's where you can get me.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining. Throwback, like I said, to the Isaac Trotter show. RIP. Let it fly with the doves ahead, fly with the eagles. So that is it for us. Will should be back next week. Maybe I'll take a week off and force Isaac to come back again at some point. But
I'm down.
all right, perfect. We'll figure it out as we go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you to Corey Aldis, our producer behind the scenes, to Trilly at Basket Under Review, to Sam Freyer for our graphics, and Home Field Apparel for our sponsor. That's it for us, folks. We'll catch you again next week. Cheers.